I stood beside my father in the wide living room, holding my hands together so they wouldn't shake. The room smelled like furniture polish and old paper, like a library that nobody visited anymore. Family filled the chairs around us, whispering and watching me like I didn't belong there. Some of them I hadn't seen in years. Others I'd never really known at all. My father cleared his throat and smiled the way he did when he wanted control. He raised his glass and said, "This is my son Andrew." Well, not really family. Laughter moved through the room, soft but sharp. My face burned. I felt small, like a guest who had stayed too long at a party where everyone wanted me gone. My job, my life, everything I had built was suddenly a joke to them. My father's eyes never met mine. He spoke about legacy, bloodlines, and pride, all while cutting me out with calm, measured words. I wanted to speak. I wanted to defend myself. But my voice stayed locked in my chest like it always did around him. Then I heard a chair scrape against the floor. The notary, Mr. Collins, stood up slowly. He adjusted his glasses and said, "Before we continue, I need to read what is written here." The room went silent. That was the moment everything began to change, even though no one knew it yet. I grew up believing family was safety. As a child, I followed my father everywhere, proud just to share his last name. I wanted to be like him. Strong. Important. Respected. My mother died when I was 9 years old, and after that, the house felt colder. The warmth seemed to leave with her. My father became strict and distant, always watching me like I was a test he expected to fail. I tried so hard to earn his approval. I worked after school, saving every dollar. I paid for my own college classes when he said my plans were foolish and not worth his investment. When I chose my job in community outreach, he said it embarrassed him. He told people I was confused or lost, like I was a child who didn't know any better. Still, I came home when he called. When he invited me to the family gathering to hear about his estate, I thought maybe this was peace. Maybe this was finally the moment he would see me for who I really was. I didn't know he had planned to humiliate me. He had already told my uncles and cousins that I wasn't part of the future. I learned later he said blood mattered more than effort, that real family meant something different than just being his son. That night, standing in that room, I realized I had been walking into a trap built over many years, with quiet, deliberate care. The gathering felt formal, almost cold. Everyone dressed in dark colors, like it was a funeral instead of a family meeting. The curtains were drawn. The lights were low. My Aunt Susan sat near the window, arms crossed tight across her chest. My cousin Mark wouldn't look at me, studying his shoes like they were the most interesting thing in the room. My father stood tall by the fireplace, speaking with confidence that filled every corner. He talked about success and respect. He talked about how some people earned their place in this family. When he said I was not really family, I felt something break inside me. It was like a string snapping, one I didn't even know was holding me together. I remembered the times I was left out of holidays. Christmas dinners I wasn't invited to. Thanksgiving celebrations that happened without me. The way my calls went unanswered for weeks at a time. The way my job was always given as the reason. I worked in community outreach, helping people find housing and work. My father said it was shameful and useless. He said I was wasting my education. As he spoke, I saw a small smile on his face. He enjoyed this. He enjoyed the control, the attention, the power. Then Mr. Collins cleared his throat again. He held a sealed envelope in his hand. "This document," he said, "was filed years ago and must be read in full." My father frowned. I felt my heart start to race, not with hope yet, but with curiosity. Years earlier, I had met Mr. Collins only once. My father called him, just a witness for some paperwork. I never thought much of it. I didn't know that day would matter so much later. I didn't know my mother had chosen him specifically. When Mr. Collins began to read, his voice was steady and clear. He spoke about a trust created after my mother's death. My father's face tightened. His jaw clenched. People shifted uncomfortable in their seats, the leather creaking under them. The document said my mother had concerns. Deep concerns. She worried I would be treated unfairly after she was gone. She worried my father's pride would blind him to what really mattered. So she made plans. Secret plans. Legal plans. I watched my father's hands curl slowly into fists at his sides. He tried to interrupt twice, but Mr. Collins raised a hand each time. "I am required by law to finish," he said calmly, without emotion. The room felt heavy, like the air had turned thick. I could hear my own breathing. I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel. The trust named me as the primary beneficiary, but not just for money. It named me as the executor of future family assets if certain conditions were broken. One specific condition was public denial of my place in the family. My father laughed once, sharp and fake. "That's ridiculous," he said, his voice breaking slightly. Mr. Collins looked at him and replied, "It is already activated." Gasps filled the room. Sharp intakes of breath. My aunt stood up quickly, then sat back down just as fast, like she didn't know what to do with herself. My cousin's face turned pale, all the color draining away. Someone dropped their glass. The sound of it hitting the carpet seemed louder than it should have been. My father's voice rose, getting louder with each word. He said the document was old and meaningless. He said my mother had been emotional and unstable. He said it didn't count, couldn't count, wouldn't count. Mr. Collins didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply continued reading in that same steady tone. He explained that my mother had placed recordings, letters, and witnesses into the trust. She had predicted this exact moment with painful, heartbreaking clarity. I felt tears press against my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I stayed perfectly still, hardly breathing. The trust froze several accounts immediately. Control shifted in an instant. I felt like the floor had moved under everyone's feet except mine. I was the only one still standing on solid ground. My father stared at me, then really looked at me for the first time that night, like I was a stranger who had won a game he didn't know he was playing. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I let the paper speak for me. That was my quiet revenge. Not loud, not cruel, but exact and precise. The notary finished reading. The room stayed silent. For the first time in my entire life, my father had absolutely nothing to say. After the reading, people avoided my eyes like I had become dangerous. The gathering ended fast. Chairs scraped across the hardwood floor. Doors closed with soft clicks. Whispers followed people into the hallway. My father left without looking back, his shoulders rigid with anger and something else. Maybe shame. Maybe disbelief. I stayed behind with Mr. Collins. The room felt bigger now that everyone had gone, emptier but somehow lighter. He handed me copies of the documents. His voice softened in a way it hadn't before. He said my mother had loved me fiercely, more than I probably knew. She had planned everything because she feared I would be alone one day, abandoned by the family who should have protected me. I walked outside into the cool night air, holding the papers close to my chest like they were precious. I felt grief and relief at the exact same time. Grief for the mother who had to plan for this. Relief that she had seen it coming and saved me anyway. Over the next weeks, calls came in. One after another. Family members wanted meetings. They wanted explanations. They wanted to understand what had just happened. Some wanted favors, their voices careful and polite in ways they'd never been before. I listened quietly to all of them. I told them the trust would be handled fairly, exactly as my mother intended. No more, no less. No revenge. No favoritism. Just fairness. My father sent one message through my aunt. It said I had embarrassed him in front of everyone. It said I'd planned this somehow. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask to talk. I didn't reply. For the first time in my life, I felt free from chasing approval. I had proof not just of worth but of truth. Real truth that couldn't be argued away. I realized revenge didn't have to be loud. Sometimes, it just had to be patient and precise. As executor, I followed every single rule. I hired advisors who specialized in estate law. I kept records clear and organized. I didn't rush any decisions. Everything had to be done right, exactly right, because I knew my father would be watching for any mistake. My father tried to challenge the trust in court. He hired expensive lawyers who wore expensive suits. They filed motion after motion. The judge reviewed everything carefully and dismissed his claim completely. The recordings my mother left were clear as crystal. Her voice filled the courtroom, calm and strong, speaking from beyond the grave. She spoke about love. She spoke about fairness and justice. She spoke about her fears for me. She said she trusted me to do the right thing when the time came. That trust carried me through long nights and hard decisions. I didn't cut anyone off out of anger or spite. I simply followed the plan she'd laid out. Every step. Every detail. Exactly as she'd written it. Family members began to treat me differently. Some were genuinely kind, apologizing for how they'd acted. Some were just careful, worried about what I might do with my new authority. My father stayed distant. He told people I had manipulated the situation somehow, that I'd tricked my mother when she was vulnerable. But his words had less power now. People had heard the recordings. They knew the truth. I returned to my work, helping others, with new confidence. My job no longer felt small or shameful. It felt honest and real and important. Sometimes I thought about that night. The way silence fell when the notary stood. The way everyone froze. That silence healed something deep inside me. It told me I was never really invisible. I was just waiting for the truth to speak louder than lies. Months later, I saw my father at a public event. He avoided me. He looked older, smaller. I felt no joy in that. Only closure. I learned revenge wasn't about watching him fall. It was about standing without fear. My mother's plan didn't destroy the family. It revealed it. Some relationships ended. Others grew stronger. I kept the documents safe, but I no longer needed to read them. Their words lived inside me now. When people asked how I felt, I said I felt clear. That clarity was my victory. The weeks turned into months and life found a new rhythm. I worked harder than before, but with purpose instead of desperation. Every person I helped find housing reminded me why I chose this path. My father's voice criticizing my career choice grew fainter in my memory. I built friendships with coworkers who respected what I did. They never asked about money or status. They saw value in the work itself. That meant more than any inheritance ever could. Time didn't soften my father. It only made him quieter and more withdrawn. Weeks after the court decision, he stopped calling everyone. Family dinners went on without him. His house stayed dark at night, curtains drawn. People said he was thinking or processing. I knew better. He was losing control, and control was the air he breathed. I focused completely on my duties as executor. I reviewed old files, bank letters, and handwritten notes my mother had hidden away in various places. Every single page showed how carefully she had planned. She never wanted drama or chaos. She wanted protection for me. Simple, clear protection. One letter stood out among all the others. It said my father feared embarrassment more than truth. He feared looking weak more than being wrong. She wrote that one day he would deny me publicly to protect his image, his reputation. Reading that hurt more than his actual words ever did, because she'd known. She'd known exactly what he would do. I locked the letter away in a drawer I rarely opened. Then an invitation arrived in the mail. A formal one, printed on heavy paper. My father was hosting a small gathering to clear misunderstandings. My name was listed last on the invitation, almost like an afterthought. I knew exactly what it was. He wanted one more stage, one more audience, one more chance to control the narrative. I decided to go. Not to argue. Not to beg for anything. Just to listen and see what he would do next. The gathering was smaller than before. Fewer smiles. Fewer confident voices. My father stood near the fireplace, stiff and proud. When he saw me, his jaw tightened. He introduced everyone except me. Finally, someone asked, "And Andrew?" My father hesitated. That pause said everything. "This is Andrew," he said. "He handles paperwork now. No son. No family." I felt calm. I had expected this. Mr. Collins was there too, sitting quietly. My father hadn't noticed him yet. As the night went on, my father spoke about legacy again. He talked about mistakes and misunderstandings. He never apologized. Then he said something dangerous. He said the trust was built on lies. He said my mother was manipulated. I met Mr. Collins' eyes. He nodded once. That was all it took. The room felt charged with tension. People sensed something was coming but couldn't name it. My Aunt Susan looked nervous. Mark stared at his shoes. I remained perfectly still, watching my father dig himself deeper with every word. Mr. Collins stood slowly, deliberately. The room fell silent again, just like it had before at the first gathering. He said there was an addendum to the trust that hadn't yet been read publicly. An addendum my mother had written specifically for this kind of situation. My father froze completely, his face going pale. "Hello everyone, and thank you for being here. Before the story continues, take a second to tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I truly enjoy seeing how far these stories travel and hearing from you directly. One important note, some elements in this story have been fictionalized for educational and storytelling purposes, and any resemblance to real people or settings is coincidental. That said, the message I'm sharing is meaningful and I hope it speaks to you." The addendum stated very clearly that if my father ever questioned my mother's mental state or truthfulness, if he ever suggested she'd been manipulated or confused, additional control would transfer to me permanently. No appeals. No exceptions. No way back. My father shouted that this was unfair and illegal. He said he was being punished for speaking his mind. He said this couldn't be allowed to stand. Mr. Collins replied calmly, without any emotion in his voice, "No. You were warned. Multiple times. In writing." The document named me as the final authority over everything. Every account. Every property. Every decision. No appeals allowed. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I simply watched my father sit down heavily, defeated not by me, not by some plan I'd made, but by his own words. His own inability to stop himself from attacking her memory. People left early. They grabbed their coats and bags quickly. No one defended him. No one stayed to offer comfort. That night, driving home alone, I understood something clearly. He didn't lose because I fought him or schemed against him. He lost because he absolutely couldn't stop trying to erase me, to erase my mother, to rewrite history into something he could control. The drive home felt long. I replayed the evening in my mind, seeing my father's face when he realized what he'd done. Part of me felt sadness. A smaller part felt vindication. Mostly I felt tired. After that night, my father disappeared from family life. I never blocked him. He never reached out. I finished my work as executor with care. I honored every rule my mother set. I made sure no one was humiliated the way I had been. Some family members apologized quietly. Others stayed distant. I accepted both. My job no longer embarrassed anyone. In fact, people asked for help. I helped when I could. One evening, I visited my mother's grave. I told her everything was done. I told her she had been right. The wind was soft. I felt peace. Revenge didn't feel like fire. It felt like balance. My father once said I wasn't really family. He was wrong. I was the only one who never tried to pretend. Spring came, bringing new projects at work. I led a housing initiative that helped 20 families find homes. Each success felt like proof that my path had meaning. At night, I slept without the old anxiety that used to keep me awake, wondering if I'd ever be enough. Power changes the temperature of a room. When people realized my decisions were final, voices dropped. Smiles became careful. No one raised their tone around me anymore. I noticed how often my father's name came up in whispers. People wondered where he was, why he stopped showing up, why the house stayed closed. I knew the answer. He had built his life on being seen as strong. Losing control meant losing himself. One afternoon, I received a letter from him. Not an email. A letter. It said I had turned his family against him. It said I was cruel. It said my mother would be ashamed. I read it once. Then I placed it in the trust records. Emotion had no power there. Only facts did. That night, I authorized the final restructuring of the estate. Everything shifted exactly as the documents allowed. Nothing illegal. Nothing rushed. Just cold, precise follow-through. The kind my father never expected from me. Winter came early that year. I visited the old family house with an assessor. The heat was off. Dust sat heavy on the furniture. This house once felt like a kingdom. Now it felt like a museum to pride. The assessor spoke about market value. I barely listened. I remembered standing in this hallway as a child, waiting for approval that never came. The trust allowed me to sell the property if it became non-functional. I declared it exactly that. Word spread fast. My father showed up for the first time in months. He stood across the street watching. He didn't cross over. I didn't wave. He looked smaller than I remembered. That night, I signed the sale papers. I slept deeply for the first time in years. The house sold within a month. A young family bought it, planning to fill it with laughter and warmth. I imagined children running through those halls, making it a home again. That thought brought me unexpected comfort. People often think revenge is loud. Mine was paperwork. Banks called me, not him. Lawyers waited for my instructions. His name slowly disappeared from authority. A cousin told me he had tried to access an account and failed. She said he was shaking. I felt nothing. Not anger. Not joy. Just distance. One morning, Mr. Collins called to say one final clause needed execution. It involved a public acknowledgement of beneficiaries. My father was required to attend. If he refused, he lost the last remaining benefit tied to his name. He came. He sat quietly. He didn't look at me. When the statement was read, my name was spoken clearly. No hesitation. No doubt. He signed with trembling hands. That signature ended everything. I watched him leave the office, his shoulders hunched forward. For a moment, I almost called out to him. Almost offered something. But I remembered every moment he'd denied me, every wound he'd opened. I let him go. After that, silence followed. No letters. No messages. I heard he moved into a smaller place outside town. People said he kept to himself. Sometimes I imagined him replaying moments in his head, wondering where control slipped. I knew the answer. It slipped the first time he decided I was disposable. I stayed focused on my work. I helped people find housing, jobs, safety. The irony wasn't lost on me. I built stability for strangers while my own father unraveled. At night, I slept without dreams. The trust's final accounts were closed 6 months later. Everything was distributed according to my mother's precise instructions. Fair, measured, deliberate. My Aunt Susan called to thank me. She said she understood now what my mother had tried to protect. I accepted her words without comment. Some bridges were too burned to rebuild. Some just needed time. I didn't know which this was, and I didn't mind the uncertainty. One evening, a call came from an unknown number. It was him. His voice sounded thin. He said he needed help. He said he was sick. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When he finished, I said I would review his request under the trust guidelines. He paused. He asked if I was serious. I said yes. I followed the rules exactly. He received limited support. No control. No access. Just enough. Mercy without power. That hurt him more than rejection ever could. The trust allowed for basic medical support for all family members. I approved what was necessary, nothing more. No exceptions. No special treatment. My father received the same care any distant relative would get. He called once more after that, angry and bitter. I didn't answer. I let the lawyers handle communication. Boundaries became my new language, spoken fluently and without apology. I had learned it from my mother's letters, from her careful planning. Family members asked why I didn't forgive him fully. I told them forgiveness and access weren't the same thing. They stopped asking. I learned something important then. Boundaries scare people who lived on privilege. My father faded from conversation. New topics replaced him. Time kept moving. So did I. Work expanded. I was promoted to director of our regional office. The job came with respect I'd never experienced before. People listened when I spoke. They valued my opinion. They trusted my judgment. None of them knew about the trust or the family drama. They knew me for what I did, not who my father was. That anonymity felt like freedom. I bought a small house across town. Simple, clean mine. I filled it with books and plants. I hosted dinners for friends from work. I built a life that didn't require anyone's permission. It felt revolutionary. Years passed. The trust reached its final phase. I closed accounts, archived documents, sealed the past. Mr. Collins retired. He thanked me for honoring my mother's intent. I thanked him for speaking when silence mattered most. That sentence stayed with me. I realized my mother had chosen Mr. Collins carefully. She needed someone who would speak truth to power, someone who couldn't be intimidated or bought. He was exactly that person. At his retirement party, I gave a short speech about integrity. People clapped, but I meant every word for him alone. He nodded once, understanding. Some debts can't be repaid, only acknowledged. The trust documents went into a safety deposit box. I visited them once a year just to remember. Not to relive the pain, but to honor the protection. My mother had saved me from a future of endless pursuit, endless rejection. She had given me the power to stand still while others collapsed. I saw my father one last time at a distance. He sat alone on a bench, watching nothing. He didn't see me. I didn't approach. Some endings don't need words. I stood there for several minutes just observing. He looked tired. His clothes hung loose. His hair had gone completely gray. I felt no triumph. No satisfaction. Just a quiet sadness for what could have been if he'd chosen differently. I thought about walking over, saying something. Offering one last chance at connection. But I knew better. He would see it as weakness. He would take it as an opening to regain control. Some people can't change. They can only diminish. I turned and walked away, leaving him to his solitude. The sun was setting. The air smelled like autumn. I felt nothing but ready to go home. That readiness was its own kind of peace. People sometimes ask how it felt to win. I tell them it didn't feel like winning. It felt like standing still while someone else collapsed under their own weight. I never raised my voice. I never begged. I let the truth speak. The truth was patient. It waited years to be heard. When it finally spoke, it needed no embellishment, no drama. It simply was. My mother understood that. She built her entire plan on the foundation of undeniable truth. Recordings, letters, witnesses, timestamps. Everything documented. Everything verifiable. She knew my father would lie. She knew he would deny. She knew he would attack. So she made the truth louder than his voice could ever be. I inherited that strategy. I learned to document everything, to keep records, to let facts do the heavy lifting. It served me well in work. It served me well in life. I became known for fairness, for following rules, for keeping my word. That reputation mattered more than any title. My job grew. I led programs. I trained others. I became known for fairness and calm. That reputation mattered more than any inheritance. People sought my advice on difficult cases. I helped navigate complex housing situations, mediated disputes, built coalitions. The work felt meaningful in ways I couldn't fully explain. Every family I helped stay together felt like a small victory against what I'd experienced. Every person I helped find stability felt like honoring my mother's memory. She had wanted me protected. Now I protected others. The cycle completed itself in ways I never expected. I mentored young workers, especially those who seemed lost or unsure. I saw myself in them sometimes. I told them their worth wasn't determined by family approval. I told them to build something real, something that couldn't be taken away by someone else's opinion. Some listened. Some didn't. I helped anyway, because that's what people had done for me when I needed it most. On the anniversary of my mother's death, I reread her letters. She wrote that silence could be sharp if used right. She was right. The letters revealed a woman who understood power dynamics better than anyone I'd ever met. She saw how my father operated. She predicted his moves years before he made them. She was a strategist, a protector, a planner. I inherited her patience, her attention to detail, her refusal to fight on someone else's terms. I placed flowers on her grave every year. I told her what I'd accomplished. I told her about the people I'd helped. I told her I was okay. The wind always seemed to answer, rustling through the trees nearby. I chose to believe she heard me. Belief didn't require proof, just required trust. And trust was something she taught me to value, to protect, to honor. I carried her lessons into every decision I made, every boundary I set, every time I chose peace over victory. I no longer needed revenge. What I had built couldn't be taken. My career stood on its own merit. My reputation was earned, not inherited. My peace came from within, not from external validation. The trust had served its purpose. It protected me when I was vulnerable. It gave me space to grow when I needed it most. But I wasn't that person anymore. I was stronger now. Not because I'd defeated my father, but because I'd learned to stop needing his defeat. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. I had reached indifference. His approval or disapproval no longer touched me. His presence or absence made no difference. I existed independent of his narrative. That independence was the real victory. I helped a family move into their new home. The children ran through empty rooms, claiming spaces, dreaming futures. Their mother thanked me with tears in her eyes. I told her it was my job. But it was more than that. It was my purpose. And purpose needed no revenge. My father once said I wasn't really family. Now his name is barely remembered. Mine is written everywhere it mattered. And I never had to explain myself. The community center named a program after me. Local newspapers featured my work. Politicians asked for my input on housing policy. None of it felt like glory. It felt like consequence. Good work leads to recognition. Consistency leads to trust. Time reveals character. I had all three. My father had none. That wasn't my doing. That was his choice made repeatedly over years. I thought about that gathering years ago when he'd called me, not really family, in front of everyone. I thought about the silence that followed Mr. Collins' reading. I thought about my mother's voice on those recordings, calm and certain. She had known. She had always known. And she had loved me enough to plan for the worst while hoping for the best. That love sustained me through everything that followed. I carried it still in every decision, every boundary, every moment of peace. My father was wrong. I was family. I was just the only one who never forgot what that word was supposed to mean. If this story resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to this channel for more true stories like this one. Leave a comment below, telling me what you would have done in my situation. I read every single one. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Your share might save someone's life. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I know this wasn't an easy story to hear, and I want to be honest with you. Some of the stories that follow contain fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If that's not something you're comfortable with, feel free to explore other content that suits you better. But if you're willing to learn from real experiences, even painful ones, I'll be here sharing what I've learned. God bless you. And remember, protecting what is yours is never optional.